Hello and welcome to my channel. So in this video, I want to share with you the experience that I've had in terms of implementation of core banking system changeover from the old system to the new system. I've been implementing core banking systems for the last 2 decades, and I thought it's necessary for me to share with you the mindset that you should carry with you in terms of how we are supposed to implement a project that is related to changeover of core banking system from the old system to the new system. So core banking system changeover has never been easy. I can tell you from my experience. It's a very challenging environment, and I can tell you it's actually called a transformational project. It's not like any normal project, because you're going to change so many things in terms of the old way of doing things, the processes, the standard operating procedures. Most of them they're also going to change, and it normally takes a lot of time. Maybe minimum if it's a normal changeover, it's around 18 months from experience. But you can go as far as 2 or 3 years when you try to change the core banking system. So I decided to share with you the kind of mindset that you have to carry with you when you want to implement successfully the core banking system as a project. So in this section of the video, we're going to cover cluster number 3, which is to configure for the bank that you are becoming. So what does it mean? When you're looking at the scope and the build that you want to do, you don't just do it for the sake of doing it. You need to tailor it in such a way that it can serve what you want to do as a bank. So let us look at what we're going to cover. All right. So we're going to cover that when you're designing a CBS, it's not a system installation. It's operating model design, and we also need to avoid over customization unless it is very clear business value. And also, every functional delta must have an owner. Then the product configuration must be also business owned. And then you also need to build completeness. So let us go through them one by one, the mindset. So the first mindset that we're going to look into for this build and scope is CBS implementation is not just installation. Okay, you don't just install. You need to make sure that you're also having an operational model design, not just installation. So what does it mean? Treating a CBS project as an installation software misses every product, okay? And then workflow and also control in the bank being redesigned around a new system. This is very important. I've seen so many resistance from some bank users of the system because it was more of being pushed by ICT as a software installation instead of addressing the pain points of the users. So CBS implementation should always address the pain points, the product challenges that the users are facing. Otherwise, the buy-in is going to be very difficult. So this mindset is very important. Always make sure that you are modeling the CBS system to assist the bank in its operation. So what goes wrong if this is ignored? Okay, if this is ignored, you find that the teams, they install software, but they fail to redesign on how the bank is going to work. This is very, very important. You can just give people a system which does not serve their purpose. Most likely, they're not going to use it. Some years back, I've seen some users going back to Excel instead of using the loans module, which was being implemented in the core banking system. So that is very, very important. So what is the mindset for the project manager? The configuration should reflect the products, the controls, and also the approvals, the maker and checker, and then the accounting and also user journey. It must be something that is going to be helpful, that is going to add value, not just a software installation. So this mindset is very important. Don't just go to a core banking project, you implement the software without addressing, especially the pain points from the users. It will not help. It must also reflect on the products they are going to use or they're going to use to serve their customers. Then let us look at a scenario. A project team celebrates the CBS being installed and configured on schedule, which means it was on time. 6 weeks later, branches realize that none of their actual account opening or loan approval workflows were actually redesigned to match their new system. So this is one of the scenarios you might find. So always make sure that You are involving the users from the beginning all the way up to the end, or stakeholders from the beginning all the way up to the end, so that if there are any changes, they can also raise them. If they are not happy with a certain way the product was configured, you can address it earlier before you go live. So, what are the practical actions? You need to define the target operating model before finalizing the system. How are you going to make things work? This is where UAT takes effect. You want users to feel the system, to test the system, and also to confirm and approve it. Involve process owners, not just ICT in every configuration. This is very important. When you are implementing a new banking system, we are doing a cutover of an existing system. Make sure the users are involved from the beginning in terms of requirements gathering or requirements definition. You involve the users. In terms of creation of test scripts, you also involve the users on the test cases. And also in terms of testing the system, which is UAT and test rehearsal, you must also involve the users. Then also judge the implementation complete by working operating processes, not installed software. This is the challenge with normally ICT department. For them, it's complete when it's installed, but for users, it's complete when it's serving a business value. Let's move to the next one. So the next mindset you should also have is avoid over customization. I have to emphasize this. Over customization is the killer of most of the core banking system implementation. Unless there's a clear business value, in most cases you find it's just a preference, but there's no business value, or people just want to do whatever they were doing previously. They want to do it in the new system. So over customization is a challenge, and I can tell you, I'm yet to see a core banking system that caters for every customer, every market. In some markets, you have to customize it so that it can satisfy their needs, but you don't need to over customize. It will be a very big challenge when it comes to upgrades. So, what goes wrong when ignored? Okay, if you ignore this mindset of over customization, the bank recreates old inefficiencies inside the new CBS system. This is very important. So if when you're changing the system, what I've also experienced is the users, they want whatever was working in the old system to be in the new system. Whether there's something that is existing in the new system, they will think that it's just an export of what was working in the old system to the new system. And that is going to force you to over customize their needs. And then you face challenges in future. Sometimes, in some cases, you find that there's no actual business value, but it's just a way the users are used to doing their work. So what is the correct mindset that the project manager should have? Customization increases costs, okay? Testing burden, upgrade complexity, and also support risk. So as a project manager, you should be able to explain that there are some of these customizations which might not be necessary, okay? It can still be done in a better way using the current system. Or else the bank is going to face some challenges when it comes to upgrade, or also when it comes to support. So let us look at one scenario, okay? A request comes in to custom build a bespoke approval workflow, even though the vendor's standard configuration already supports 90% of what is needed. The custom build later requires its own test cycle, okay, defect management, and also the upgrade path. So this is scenario that we have. They've requested for a bespoke approval workflow, okay, and 90% of what is needed is already covered in the system, but they still need to customize this. So this will give a challenge when it comes to upgrade. So what are the practical actions? You need to require a documented business justification for every customization. It has to be approved one way or the other, so that you don't just import what was in old into the new system. Another practical action is attempt to standardize configuration first and only escalate to custom build when it cannot be met. Okay. So always try to see what exactly exists in the new system, what can be standardized in the new system before you start asking for any customization. Also track the total count of customization, the cost as a program, to also show as a risk indicator. This is very important. So if you have got so many customizations, they don't just affect time only. They can also affect cost. They can also affect the risk. So you have to make sure that you are also checking the total counts on that. Then number 3, we have the functional deltas must have an owner. they must have a reason and a test path. This is a very good mindset I can share with you. When you create a delta, is a difference between what the system can do and what the users are seeing in the system. So for you, you might need to bridge that delta probably through some customization. Okay, but every delta must have an owner. So what does this mean? It means an owner who is going to be responsible for that delta, and it must have a test path. Okay, so test path is what is supposed to be done for that delta. So why does it matter? In unowned functional gap, is no one accountable for closing it. If a delta is not owned by anyone, it will never be closed. Okay. There's no one explaining why it exists, and audit or reputation is going to be, or regulator is going to ask. Okay. So what goes wrong when this is ignored? You find that the team builds features without business sign off or coverage. So as a project manager, what is the mindset? Correct mindset you should have. Unowned deltas, they become unresolved design. They build or testing. So every delta must be owned by someone who's going to be responsible for its definition of requirements, responsible also for its build and also for the testing. So let us look at a scenario. Okay. During a late stage review, okay, a gap between the bank's trade finance requirement and the new system's standard functionality is discovered with no assigned owner. There is no assigned owner. Remember, every delta must have assigned owner. So no documented reason or test plan. And nobody remembers why it was left open because there was no owner. So this is the scenario. So let us look at the practical actions now. You need to assign a named owner to each and every functional delta that you have picked during your core banking system implementation. And also you need to document the reason, the business impact of each gap. There's a temptation to always have so many gaps in the deltas, but some of them they might not be necessary. So you need to also to compare with the best practice and also the impact, business impact. Is it going to help or it's not going to help? Then you also need to confirm the test path. If the user cannot test, then obviously the delta cannot be produced. So they should be able to come up with the way they're going to test it in the system. This is very, very important. So these practical actions are actually very important to consider. Then number 4, we are also looking at the product configuration must be business owned. It must not be vendor owned. This is a very important mindset too. I've seen so many configurations being vendor driven, not business driven. They must be business driven, not vendor driven. Okay. So why does it matter? The vendor-led configuration reflects vendors' assumptions about how a bank would work. Okay. Not the bank's actual products, policies, and risk. I can tell you, a vendor cannot know more than the bank's operations guys. So the best that should be done is the operation team or the bank users are the ones who are supposed to own the configuration. Say, for example, you want to configure the currencies that can be used in a specific market for that project. You cannot have a vendor defined for you. Probably something that is probably a US dollar does not work in that market. It could be Japanese yuan does not Japanese yen does not work in that market. It could be even the pounds does not work in that market. So it's very important that the configuration is actually owned by the users of the bank. They know better than the vendor. So what goes wrong when this is ignored? Okay, the vendor is going to configure what it thinks is right. Business discovers during VAT or go live that it doesn't work. So always make sure that this mindset is actually implemented. You have the vendor configuration, okay, which does not solve or help the business operations. So let the business operators define the configuration, and then the vendor can even help them to define the configuration because they have more experience, but they don't own it. So what is the correct project manager mindset on this? The products, the charges, the fees, limits, interest, accounting rules, they need the bank to be accountable. This is what I always emphasize in my projects. Of course, we have vendor consultants assisting the users, but charges, for example, fees, this is a revenue to the bank. It cannot be owned by a vendor. It has to be owned by the bank. The bank, they must take accountability for those things like limits, interest, and also the products. So let us look at a scenario as an example. The vendor configures the loan products suite, okay, loan product suite based on their standard template. They are using a standard template as a vendor. It isn't until UAT that lending discovered that moratorium, okay, and early settlement rules, they don't match the bank's credit policy. This is very important. So a vendor was actually using a template, okay, to configure the products. It was only in UAT that a moratorium and early settlement rules, they don't match the bank's credit policy at all. So which means this mindset was actually ignored. The vendor was the one configuring instead of having the product being done by the business owners or system user. So what are the practical actions that you can take? Okay. So the first one is assign a business owner. This is very important to sign off every product and configuration. Business owner should come from the bank, not from the vendor. They are the ones who are supposed to be assigned responsibility to make sure that whatever requirements are defined there, whatever outcome or output is expected there, is also owned by them. Then number two, practical item is review the vendor. Then number two, practical item, review the vendor proposed configuration against the bank's actual policies. In most cases, the vendors, they don't know the bank's policies. So therefore, it is important for the bank to make sure that whatever they're configuring is aligned to their policies, also in system capabilities. Then the other one is never accept this is how the system normally works, is sufficient justification. Sometimes vendors, they want to make quick solutions and move on. So they will just tell you that this is how the system works, so accept it and then let's move on. So always try to challenge that scenario. So this particular mindset is very important. Product configuration, okay, must be owned by the business. This is very important. Business must own this. Then the last of this section on the scope and also build is build completeness must be proven through working business scenarios. This is very important. You might be told by the technical guys that the build is complete, but how do they know? The only way for them to know is to test different business scenarios for them to confirm that the build is complete. You might be asking, what is a build? A build is just an acceptable software that can be tested by the users for acceptance. So it can result in two outcomes. Build is accepted, then you proceed to the next stage, or the build is rejected, then you have to rework to make sure the solution is working. So why does it matter? A configured system can look complete on a checklist while still being unable to support the real, sometimes messy business scenario that the staff is going to face. So this is very important. You don't want to hear a technical guy saying it's complete. What does complete mean? Or what is the definition of done from a technical person? From a technical person, a definition of done is they've installed, there was no error. But when it comes to the users, they want to test the different scenarios of the project. They want to test the different scenarios of the business. So therefore, they're the ones who are supposed to conclude whether something is complete, the build is complete, or is not complete, not the vendor or the ICT department. So what goes wrong when this is ignored? So when this is ignored, you find there's technical completion, okay, which is normally confused with operational stability. Okay. So you should not ignore this. So what is the correct mindset that a project manager should have? You must build a build is ready when the bank can process a real end-to-end journey. So this is very important. It's only when the user is able to process transactions from the beginning all the way up to the end and see the output. It could be results, it could be any text, it could be a printed document, and so on and so forth, like statements and so on and so forth. But it must make sure that it is the user who is confirming this. So let us look at a real scenario. Configuration sign-off is granted because every screen loads correctly. Remember, we are testing end-to-end. And it's only the UAT that the team discovers a customer with a joint account, a linked loan, and even a standing order cannot be processed correctly. So this scenario, configuration sign-off is granted because every screen loads. It's only in the UAT that the team discovers this. So this is what we're talking about. If something is loading completely, for example, as a screen, to the ICT or technical guy, that is complete, but to the user, that is not complete. So that is very, very important. This is a very, very important mindset to remember when you are actually implementing a copying system. So let us look at the practical actions. Okay, you require scenario-based demonstrations before formal UAT, which means for you to say it's complete, you have scenarios, demonstrate that these scenarios are catered for in the system before you can complete it or you can go to UAT. Also include realistic combinations, not just a simple happy path scenario. So scenario testing, it has got both negative tests and also positive tests. So you should always be able to test all this before you conclude that the build is complete. Then also, you need to treat can users run the scenario as the true completion test, not screen level technical details. So this is very important. You want to make sure that is the user able to run these scenarios from end to end, for you to be able to conclude and complete that this is complete. So this is a very important mindset. You should prove first by running it through the business scenarios. So let us quickly look at the checklist for this build and scope cluster. So the first point is the delta register must be clean. You must make sure that the delta register, the difference between what the users are expecting and the system, they are also very clean, which means they are aligned. Then customization must be challenged. This is very important. In most cases, users, they bring whatever they want, even if it's not best practice, even if it's not even proper banking, they'll bring them. So you should be able to challenge it. I normally do that with my team. If there's any change that is coming from the user, before you even push it to the change control board, it must be challenged. Is it necessary? Is it going to bring value? So this is very important. Business sign-offs should be obtained. Sign-off, sometimes it forces people to rethink and confirm that things are working according to what they're expecting. If you find users not willing to sign off, then it means there must be some problem with that solution, and you need to sit with them to try to understand why they're not signing off. Then the other part of the checklist is configuration must be traceable to requirements. Don't just configure anything which has never been required, or don't just configure anything that is not going to give business value. That is very, very important. Then also, the scenario demos should be complete, not the build. If the scenario demos they are complete, you should be able to test the system, you should be able to test the build and confirm that things are working according to the user requirements. So what are the key takeaways from this cluster? Configuration is only complete when the bank can run its feature operating model through real scenarios. This is very important. So you can only confirm configuration is complete when you can run the scenarios from end to end.